All eyes on Dubai as the COP28 climate summit goes into overtime after the deadline set by host UAE passed without a deal. Delegates struggled to find common ground around the use of fossil fuels as talks ran through the night. Negotiators are working to thrash out details of a new draft text which requires the green light from close to 200 countries. The summit's Director General says the presidency wants to include an historic mention of fossil fuels in the next draft text for a deal. But it is important that countries agree on the right language to use.
It's important to be clear on something. The text we released was a starting point for discussions. Again, this is entirely normal for a consensus-based process. When we released it, we knew opinions were polarized, but what we didn't know was where each country's red lines were.
COP28 President Sultan Al Jaber had pushed for a draft deal by today, the official end of the summit. But the issue of fossil fuels has remained a sticking point. Many top oil and gas companies, such as the US, Canada and the EU, are pushing for a phase-out. Pacific Island countries already suffering from rising sea levels roundly criticized the last draft for omitting reference to a phase-out of fossil fuels. As those negotiations go into overtime with no outcome in sight, Singapore tallies up key gains made over the past 12 days. From new deals on carbon credit collaboration to commitments on concrete action to boost the green transition. Choo looks at the mark that Singapore has made.
Things are winding down here at the Singapore Pavilion in Dubai. In a few hours, the stage will go, as will the displays, the amplifiers and the seats. But Singapore has left its mark here, one that extends across sectors and beyond borders. Wrapping up nearly 2 weeks of Singapore's presence here, Sustainability and the Environment Minister Grace Fu said this has served as a platform to unveil new strategies to fight climate change and forge partnerships to drive action. And this is how the small island nation has made itself heard.
Indeed, like Singapore itself, our pavilion has been small but mighty. It is not about size, but impact. It is not about quantity, but quality. And it's not about making once-off splash or nice announcement, but a sustained commitment with follow-through actions. And this is what Singapore is known for. We do what we say, and we only say what we are prepared to do and do it.
The pavilion clocked 6,000 in-person visitors across 12 days, while its programs logged 10 times as many unique online hits. Here, panelists weighed in on the most pressing climate issues. There were workshops and deals signed on carbon credit collaborations. And of course, the money that goes into financing the green transition.
One key theme I think that has come through quite strongly is that of blended finance. So Singapore announced here at the Pavilion FAST-P, which is a blended finance initiative to combine public, private as well as philanthropic capital to accelerate green initiatives in Asia, including to accelerate the transition to low carbon energy.
Ms. Goh also pointed out that this was more than a site attended by dignitaries, business leaders and financial institutions. This site also served as a stage and an opportunity for all voices to be heard. Among them, youth delegates who got to amplify their say.
So I think the key takeaway that I'll bring back to Singapore, I think, is to bring this idea of agency and sway to youth and make sure that not just about keeping up to date with the information, but finding those platforms and building those sort of bridges with other youth and with people of other groups as well.
And that's a wrap for the Singapore Pavilion at this COP28. Now it's all about following through on the promises made. Choo, CNA, Dubai.
Another milestone in an ambitious project between Singapore and other ASEAN nations and Japan to ramp up how their industries should measure greenhouse gas emissions. The partnership is going to set standards for monitoring and reporting emissions, and it's entering its third phase. Singapore and Japan announced the next stage of their partnership, dubbed PASTI, on the sidelines of the COP28 summit in Dubai. Their goals to make emissions calculations more transparent, foster fair competition, and build trust in their carbon market dealings. They've already developed guidelines for monitoring and reporting emissions of M and R, and they've also set up a platform to share current and country-specific info in these areas. The next steps will see them implement guidelines across ASEAN countries.
PASTI will promote and support each government's efforts to adopt greenhouse gas M&R for its private sector, and through this, stimulate emission reductions efforts across ASEAN. The project will also offer technical seminars to the national focal points of the ASEAN Working Group on Climate Change.
PASTI increases the transparency of private sectors through measurement and reporting of GHG emissions. This becomes a foundation of decarbonization in the corporate sector, which is gaining interest among many business stakeholders.